IQRA TV, welcome to Real Talk. I'm your host Iqbal Wana. Welcome again to this program. I hope you enjoyed last week's program, and I hope you've enjoyed the previous week's program. And I'm absolutely certain that today's program will be something that you'll be fascinated by. I have a young man here who's done some amazing work around the history of Muslims in the world wars that were fought in the West, the First World War and the Second World War. His name is Hayyan Baba. He comes from the Forgotten Heroes of 1914-1919 Foundation, and he's the director of Muslims in World War I came to this country at a very young age. I went to secondary school here. I did my GCSEs, O-levels, and in that we studied history. And like many of you out there, we were told history in a one-dimensional way. In all that history lessons that I learned, I had history lessons around Russia, around the United States, but I was never told that in the history of the West, how Muslims had contributed to preserving the freedoms that we enjoy today. And what has been forgotten in the history of this country, by and large, is the amount of contribution, the sacrifices that Muslims made, in particularly the two world wars, what is known as the Great War, World War I, and the Second World War, which was 1940 to 1945. And this is something that millions of Muslims are also unaware of. The amount of sacrifices, the people who lost their lives in helping to fight the evil of fascism that spread across Europe in those two wars. So I have here with me, as I said, Hayyan Baba. He's come all the way from London today. I'm deeply grateful that he's taken the time out to travel from London, and he's going back this evening as well. So Hayyan, welcome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much for coming here. And I'm sure the work that you've done, it is something that is unknown within the Muslim community, or very few people know about it. I mean, not many people know about how Muslim Quddad Khan was the first non-British serving officer who won the Victoria Cross. Similarly, Nur Inayat Khan was also a female who also was honoured for her work as a spy in the Second World War. And these are things that we in our community need to know in order to challenge particularly those who tell us that we have not contributed anything to this great nation of the UK. So I'm really happy that today he's taken time out. He's come all the way from London. Hayyan, welcome to IQRA TV, and we're going to talk about your work. But can we start by some of the very basics about the work that you've been doing, the history behind how you started this work?
Sure. Well, first of all, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me. And assalamu alaikum to your viewers. Over the past 6 years, this project has grown organically. It started with first discovering journals of soldiers from my colleagues and their relatives, and how they discovered that in those journals they referred to many Muslim soldiers from all over the world, from outside of Europe,
yes,
who joined the fight in World War I for the Allies, and they were treated with so much respect and admiration by Europeans. And this was quite striking to my colleagues who found this information, because of course, like you, they also didn't learn about this in school. So the journey then started with local schools, colleges, embassies, history archives, and universities, and historians, to ask them, show me where the Muslim soldiers are, show me the records. Of course, most people didn't know that they existed. So then our researchers all around the world were asking for the archives in Arabic, Hebrew, Farsi, Urdu,
right,
and various other languages from the former colonies and Commonwealth countries. And what we found is that our researchers were the first people to ask for this information in those languages. So a lot of these archivists and librarians were aware that there were these language archive papers, but they hadn't had the time or the chance to go through them yet. And so, of course, they opened up the access to our team. And as a result, we found 850,000 unique documents in those languages. That nobody
850,000?
850,000.
That nobody had bothered to read?
No. Nobody had bothered to translate and open. Right. And we were opening these cases for the first time, at least the researchers in our team were, all over the world. So in about 40 different archives from 19 different countries.
Right. So all this research, all this material was there.
Yep.
It's available. but nobody had bothered to actually compile it or collate it,
Yep.
or turn it into a meaningful document that could show the contribution of Muslims in the First World War in particular, which is where you were the director of the Muslims in the World War I and also in the World War II. Roughly from your research, how many Muslims served? Because when we think about Muslims in the world wars, we usually tend to think about the subcontinent. What we really forget is that huge influx of Muslims from the African continent as well, particularly North Africa.
That's right.
So in totality, from your information that you've gathered, how many people do you think in total served in the 2 world wars?
Oh, in the 2 world wars, I think the number, I couldn't give you that number.
Right.
But in the First World War, from our research, we've discovered that we believe that it is more than 2.5 million soldiers and labourers from the former Commonwealth countries and former colonies of European nations.
2.5 million?
Over 2.5 million. We know that the figure is far greater,
right?
But at the moment that's a conservative estimate, an accurate one.
Right.
But we know that we have greater numbers. It's just about a case of categorizing it, proving
So
it.
these people were soldiers as well as backroom staff, as you'd call it, or support
Labourers.
staff?
Yep.
So were they
Trench diggers,
right.
ammunitions workers, support.
Right. And were the majority from the Asian subcontinent, or were they from the African continent?
No, so actually a lot of Brits will be surprised to know that the majority were not from the Asian subcontinent. So
right.
we understand the figure of Muslim soldiers from the British Indian Army to be around about 400,000 of
right.
the Muslims of the British Indian Army. And while that figure is accurate, around 2 million from the Middle East and North Africa were labourers and soldiers.
Right.
And then we have hundreds of thousands, maybe millions more from the Egyptian Labour Corps, which are unaccounted for at the moment.
I see.
So we believe that the number is far greater.
Right.
And you've got tens of thousands from South and Central Africa, from some other European nations. 5,000 US Muslims enrolled with the US forces in the First World War.
In the First World War?
5,000.
5,000 Muslims from the US?
That were residing in the US.
And this is on record, is it?
We have the information.
So this information is available, it's been recorded to say that 5,000 Muslims from the USA
Yep.
joined up the First World War
Yep.
to fight the fascist regimes of that time. I mean, even I wasn't aware of that.
A lot of people weren't aware of just the contingent from the US.
I didn't even know there was 5,000 Muslims in
that's the first
1914.
thing. A lot of people say that at first. Actually, I didn't know that there were 5,000 Muslims living in the US at the time.
Yeah,
never mind registered
right.
soldiers.
And you said you had
labourers.
400,000 Muslims in the Indian British Army who served in the First World War. Now, obviously, these were frontline soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And so there must have been many, many casualties. Many people lost their lives. Do you have any rough estimation as to how many people may have perished in these circumstances?
The current estimate of numbers by historians that they use, I believe, is around 18 million.
The total
Deaths.
in the
from World War
totality,
I. Yeah.
That obviously there was the huge tragedies all over. I'm talking about the Muslim deaths from the First World War.
I think it'd be hard to tell. I mean, I think potentially we could be looking at 3.5, maybe 4 million. But we know for sure that there were 2.5 million soldiers and labourers that we can account for. And of course, it's important to note as well, it wasn't just colonial soldiers or troops and labourers who died. In fact, everybody was cannon fodder. Everybody died in the First World War.
Well, we saw what's happened with Gallipoli with the Australian soldiers as well, who went in at the beginning of the conflict, and virtually every man on that day nearly perished and died, and that was one of the biggest tragedies. So in the sense, I mean, you've captured this information and you've produced a booklet.
That's right.
This is the booklet that you've got. And I must say, viewers, I mean, I've seen this and I saw this last week as well, and absolutely amazed at the amount of detail and knowledge and information that this booklet has. It gives you a history of the whole involvement and engagement of Muslims in particularly the First World War. And I think we've got some images that we'll be showing you throughout the program, and the contribution that Muslims made to preserving the freedom of the West. Now again, how can people access this book?
So, first of all, I thought I'd show this picture because it's my
Yes.
favourite picture.
Right.
And it shows an Algerian soldier.
I hope the viewers can see that. Yes, they can.
It shows an Algerian soldier praying
Right.
Just near the battlefield. And I think images like this are real proof that Muslims were there, because a lot of people would deny it. In terms of the book, it was just over the last fortnight that we've published this book. We've self-published it. It's available on our website,
Right.
unknownfallen.com.
Right.
The book itself is called The Unknown Fallen, the Global Allied Muslim Contribution to the First World War.
Right. And obviously it's a historical document.
It's
How widely do you see that being circulated? I mean, do you see schools sort of taking this as part of their curriculum?
We would like to see schools, colleges, universities, historians,
Right.
madrasas, after-school settings.
Can it be bought in the local bookshop somewhere?
Yeah, there are some independent bookshops that are taking them on. At the moment, we have 2 independent bookshops in London, East London,
Right.
and one and a mosque in West London who are stocking and selling these for us.
And how much are they?
They are £49.50.
Right.
It's a coffee table book of a little over 100 pages. It has images, quotes we hope that will make the reader question what they think they know about the First World War by providing them with stimuli that would challenge what they think they know.
Well, I mean, as I said at the beginning, I think we are naive in the sense that we've never been told. You know, we've been indoctrinated in a very different mindset to show as if we have not contributed at all. Our forefathers had not contributed. And the extreme right in this country, or the right wing for that matter, has been perpetuating this myth that the Muslims have not done anything of significance for the United Kingdom and the West. And this book actually busts that myth. The work that you've done, you know, the Forgotten Heroes Foundation, and you know, you're the director of the Muslims in World War I, is absolutely essential reading, in my view, for young Muslims in particular, who are constantly faced with challenges from people who are less informed, who think that, you know, we are here just to take everything away from the country and have not contributed anything back. So in the sense, coming back to where you started, I mean, how has the project developed? I mean, obviously, how has it been funded? You know, who's supported it? And, you know, where do you see this going next? And how can young people in schools start using this in order to inform other people about the Muslim contribution in the 2 world wars?
Okay, so first of all, in terms of what I think the first most obvious thing that young people can gain from this, and that's Muslim and people of other faiths and none, is they can use this as proof to challenge the divisive rhetoric by far-right extremists, but also from other religious extremists who want to show that there's a clash of civilizations narrative. Muslims in the West, we can't get on, we can't live together. Well, in many ways, this challenges both of the core of those rhetorics, which is, first of all, documenting the contribution that Muslims have made to the history and security of Europe, but also to say this idea of a clash of civilizations is completely rubbish. If Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, Zoroastrians, people of no faith and others could come together in the trenches and fight side by side against a common enemy,
Yes.
what's the reason why we can't do that in peacetime today? I think there's so many lessons that young people can take from this, and it's the young people who are our future leaders. They hold the keys to how our national psyche is in the future.
Obviously, yes. I mean, my main purpose for inviting you is that I think there's a dearth of knowledge within the Muslim community. You know, as I say, we have not really researched our own history. And I recently went to the Royal Armouries, where they had some exhibitions about armaments from going back 1,000 years. And there's a lot of armaments and, you know, armour from the Mughal time. And I was fascinated to note that of the people who'd come there was no other Muslim, where there was a number of Sikh people who were interested in learning, you know, in the times of the Raj, how the Sikh army, the Indian army, sort of developed and grew, and the armaments that they used. But the unique thing I learnt there was, if you look at the Mughals and the armour that they were wearing, which is made from chains small chains which were linked together. On every little chain, and I'm telling you the chains were very, very tiny, every little chain had the stamp Allah on it. So imagine a soldier wearing a full armor with a protective front, which was chain linked, and every individual chain had Allah on it. Now this is a powerful tool that young people don't see and don't hear about. Similarly, this information is not taught in schools. So how can we bring this information in front of our children to empower them so they can stand up and be counted? You know?
Absolutely. Well, schools, mosques, madrasas, and other similar settings, they can come directly to us and engage with us because we offer also tours for schools groups, children, as well as adult groups, to take them to the battlefield sites in northern France.
Oh, you take them to France?
Yep. It's a 2-day visit over a weekend, or any time of their suiting. We take group bookings. We take them to the battlefield sites, the cemeteries, museums.
And do we have Muslim cemeteries in
yes,
battlefields?
There are Muslim cemeteries. There are Indian cemeteries, Chinese cemeteries, Egyptian, Russian, German. They're all there.
Right.
South African as well. And we visit all of these. We don't just visit the Muslim sites. The reason for this is because it demonstrates the diversity in the First World War. So not only do participants come and see for their own eyes the proof of the sheer number of Muslims who took part, because you see so many graves engraved with Arabic, but also you see names in Arabic or Urdu or Farsi and other languages of many soldiers who have no graves because their remains were not found.
Right.
And you'll see this in the Ring of Remembrance, for example.
So these are unknown soldiers, basically.
Yeah.
But does the book also talk about the Merchant Navy? Because I know from what little that I've read in the past, there were many Muslims who were served in the Merchant Navy as well, and many of them unfortunately lost their lives. May Allah bless them. You know, from ships that would, torpedoed, etc. So, do you have any information about Muslims who served in the naval forces?
Not in the detail that you may expect. So one of the other ways in which we have decided to be different from the normal teaching of history is that we don't teach history, we don't intend to teach history in this book in the traditional way. We don't just give statistics, dates and events. We want to magnify the human experience of the soldiers. And the way that they interacted with each other, people of different backgrounds, nations and cultures. So this is a coffee table book, and it won't contain the kind of detail that you may expect in a traditional history book. So the short answer is no. But the long answer is what we want people to do.
Are you looking to do that, any of that work, any more research around that?
No, we will. I mean, there's so much information to look at, to unpick, to put into stories and to understand and interpret. But for now, we want to challenge what people think they know about the First World War by presenting them with images and letters and documents and information. And
are these letters which were written by the soldiers back to their families back home?
Yep.
Or the commanders sending commendations about soldiers? Because there were quite a few of those as well. All sorts. Soldiers who had served valiantly, within their forces, whose commanders were so impressed by them.
Absolutely.
That they sent back letters of recommendation, commendation, etc. That is how Khudad Khan got his Victoria Cross, one of the highest medal that a soldier could receive. And he was the first, as I say, non-British soldier to receive it. I mean, in the sense of, obviously, what you say, this is a coffee table book, it provides you a very generic picture, an overall view, but the devil's in the details, so forgive the pun. In terms of history for young people, are you thinking of providing some information that will actually give young people that knowledge to say X thousand Muslims served, X thousand died unfortunately, and yet you say we did not contribute? Are there any proposals to look around that issues?
Yes. So we are currently discussing with a number of people quite recently about how we create information and packs for schools. Maybe they might take the shape of lesson plans, or it could be curriculum material. We haven't decided exactly what, but we're having those discussions and we hope to include teachers and historians in that discussion.
Right.
So we do intend to do that, but of course it all comes with the challenges of funding and fundraising. And I should say that we don't take money from any governments or institutions associated with governments
Right.
for our neutrality. So we are funded purely by public and private donations, and of course the support from the public. And many of the ways that they can support us is by purchasing this book, and we can create those materials and information for schools and young people.
So what other work is your organization, like you say, Forgotten Heroes of 1419 Foundation? What other areas of work are you doing which is related to this, the engagement or involvement in the two great wars? Well, I know you focused on the First World War, but obviously the Second World War is equally important. And I think, the freedoms that the West fought for to fight fascism, and racism and xenophobia against the Adolf Hitler and his cronies is equally as important and much more poignant now. I mean, obviously that is a huge task as well. I mean, how do you foresee that happening in my lifetime?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I certainly hope that while we're remembering the centenary, that now is the time for this really to get traction and for people to take notice of this and to help spread the information and knowledge about this, because this year will be the final year of commemorations in Europe as we know them. But it's also important to point out that for a lot of the colonial troops, the war wasn't over in 1918. It carried on in 1919. There were still skirmishes in the Middle East, Russia, etc. And so we think that it's right that we pay tribute to their centenary next year. We certainly hope the story doesn't end at the end of this year, and I don't believe that it will. That we have so much information. I personally think that we'll be teaching children about this for the next 50 years, at least. I hope so.
And how can schools access this information, particularly Muslim schools? I mean, we've got so many Muslim schools in this country. I'm not sure whether any of them have actually thought about this subject matter. I hope if there's anybody out there who's running a Muslim school, is watching this program, please phone in and tell us if you have actually taken up this subject within your schools and taught about it or talked about it with your young people who come to your schools. Because I'm really interested in finding out how much knowledge is there out there about the contributions of Muslims in the two world wars. Because I don't think we as Muslims are really au fait with the work that was been done in the past, the people who sacrificed and gave their lives, as I say, for us to enjoy the freedoms that we do. And I think it's to our utter shame, as I mentioned about the Royal Armouries and there was nobody there, it is to our utter shame that as Muslims we tend to sort of put history in the back burner and not take the richness from it and actually use that as a positive to move forward. So if there's anybody out there who's listening, who's watching, who is involved in education, has got a Muslim school that they work in, if you have worked on this subject, I'd really welcome an opportunity to talk to you and hear your contribution. And I'm sure Hiyan would be very interested in as well. So this is something that I think we need to look at. If you haven't, as in your school, done it, then maybe talk to us or tell us what you think you could do. We're now going to go for a break. Inshallah, I hope what you've heard so far is something that you find valuable. We'll come back to it, and inshallah we'll see you soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.